The painstaking effort to sort through the aftermath of Saturday's earthquake took on new urgency today. Tropical Depression Grace could bring about 40 centimeters of rain that could trigger flash flooding and mudslides. Yet another blow to those who lost their homes and sought the open air as a refuge from aftershocks. We need 30,000 tents in the area, this man says. We were not prepared to face this problem. In Lac, the hospital is overwhelmed. Already devastated by COVID, staff moved babies out of the neonatal ward for fear the building could collapse. They've already run out of basic supplies. But getting aid to the hardest hit region in the southwest, about 180 kilometers away from the capital, Port-au-Prince, has been difficult. The area is controlled by gangs who are limiting access.
As crazy as it may sound, we only have access through helicopters. So I'd say right now that's probably the biggest challenge.
The 7.2 magnitude quake is just the latest tragedy to hit the country. Haiti is still recovering from an earthquake in 2010 that killed more than 250,000 people. It's also still reeling from the assassination of its president last month. In Montreal, Haitians are calling on the federal government to speed up immigration claims from the country.
I would expect for Canada to show the real friends of Haitians, real friends of Haiti, and to try to bring those families as quickly as possible.
Today, Haiti's president promised to speed up efforts to help the victims, but aid groups are not optimistic.
Very difficult to see, light at the end of that tunnel, honestly, because they have to negotiate with gangs.
Some help has made it through. Some patients have been airlifted to safety, but the rest are left to wait and hope that help will come. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, a CBC News team has just landed in Port-au-Prince tonight. Ellen Morrow is there for us. So, Ellen, what are you seeing so far?
Well, Andrew, it's a miserable night here in Port-au-Prince. It's windy and there's a whole lot of rain. Some of the streets that we were driving along from the airport here to the hotel were experiencing flooding. And the weather here is not as bad as the weather in the disaster zone tonight. And that weather is only going to get worse throughout the night and into the early morning hours. So you see those images in Steve's report of people sleeping outside because their homes have been destroyed, or people sleeping outside because they're too afraid their homes could still yet collapse in the aftershocks of the earthquake, or they're camped outside hospitals desperate to get care. And on top of all of that, here we are 2 days later, and they're going to have to deal with torrential rains, gusting wind. With that comes landslide risk. There's almost certainly going to be flooding, which increases the risk of diseases like cholera. So this really is a level of tragedy, this weather, 2 days after a devastating earthquake that, really just hits you in the stomach and is almost hard to wrap your head around.
Well, and Ellen, you make that point that help is needed. I mean, can you give us a little more detail on the challenges that we just heard about, particularly for aid groups?
Well, the logistics are incredibly difficult. Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry said they want to increase tenfold the aid effort to get aid into the disaster area, but that is incredibly difficult. UN agencies are actually having to negotiate with the gangs. There is gang warfare on the main road into Lac, the disaster zone. They're having to negotiate with them to create a humanitarian corridor to get aid in, but that is incredibly tenuous. Some aid is arriving by boat. Other aid is arriving by helicopter, but there's an issue of distribution as well, because there are a lot of remote villages in the affected area. So sure, you can get aid there, but then how do you get it to very specific communities once it is there? So there are a lot of layers to this. We met an aid worker at the airport tonight, Andrew, who is coming in from North Carolina, and they're still trying to figure out their own logistics of how they're going to get into the disaster zone tomorrow. So many complications trying to get help to these people who so desperately need it.
Well, and Ellen, I know you've got a lot of work to do still. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.